Have you ever stopped to wonder what is really going on inside your head when you feel that sudden rush of fear or a wave of pure happiness? It can feel like some kind of magic, right? But it's actually chemistry. Today, we are diving deep into the biological nuts and bolts that power our thoughts, our moods, and everything we do.
So let's set the scene. You're home alone, it's late, you're just about to fall asleep, and then bang, a loud, sudden noise at the door. Instantly, you're not just awake, you are wide awake. Your heart is pounding out of your chest, your mind is racing a million miles a minute. That feeling, that intense, full-body jolt of alertness, that's exactly where we're going to start. And here is the single most important idea for our entire journey today. That feeling of absolute terror, it's not just happening in your mind. No, it's the direct result of a chemical typhoon that's just been unleashed by your brain. There's a famous saying in psychology that sums this up perfectly. Everything psychological is biological. All of our moods, our ideas, our impulses, they're all kicked off by very real, very physical events happening inside our bodies. So here's our game plan to unpack all of this. We're going to start with that bump in the night. Then we'll zoom way in to look at the brain's actual building blocks. We'll see how they talk to each other, compare the body's two major communication systems, and then at the end, we'll connect all the dots with what's called the fear feedback loop. That primal urge to run, to hide, maybe even to grab the heaviest thing you can find, it's all driven by that flood of chemicals. But to really understand how that happens, we need to go smaller. I mean, much, much smaller. All right, let's get down to the absolute foundation of it all, the neuron. These are the incredible nerve cells that make up our entire nervous system. Your brain alone has billions of them. And if we want to understand ourselves, we first have to understand how these little guys work. Okay, so every neuron has three basic parts. First up is the soma, which is just the cell body. You can think of this as the neuron's command center or its life support system. It's got the nucleus, the DNA, all the machinery that keeps the cell alive and running. Basically, no soma, no neuron. It's that important. Next up, you have the dendrites. See these bushy branch-like things? They're the listeners. Their entire job is to receive messages from other cells, kind of like little antennas, and then pass what they hear along to the soma. And well, if the dendrites are the listeners, then the axon has to be the talker. This is a long, cable-like fiber that shoots electrical impulses away from the cell body, sending the message out to other neurons, or even to muscles. And you see that fatty coating on many of them? That's the myelin sheath. It's just like the insulation on an electrical wire, and it makes the message travel incredibly fast. So how does a message actually move? Well, it's like a super fast three-step dance. First, the dendrites pick up a signal. Second, this triggers the neuron's action potential. Think of it as a tiny electrical spark, an impulse that fires. And third, whoosh, that electrical charge shoots down the axon to carry the message where it needs to go. Okay, but here's the really weird part. Neurons don't actually touch each other. There's a physical gap between them. So how does the message get from the talker of one neuron to the listener of the next one if there's an empty space in between? The scale we're talking about here is it's mind-blowing. This space between neurons, it's called the synaptic gap, and it is microscopically small. We're talking less than a millionth of an inch wide. It's an impossibly tiny space, but it's absolutely crucial. The secret is that the message crosses this tiny gap using chemical messengers. They're called neurotransmitters. When that electrical impulse hits the end of the axon, it releases these neurotransmitters. They float across the gap, kind of like a tiny chemical air kiss, and fit perfectly into receptors on the next neuron, just like a key sliding into a lock. Now, these neurotransmitters come in two basic flavors. You've got your excitatory ones, which are like the gas pedal. They rev up the next neuron, making it more likely to fire. Then you have the inhibitory ones, and you guessed it, they're the brakes. They tell the neuron to chill out, making it less likely to fire. Our entire nervous system is regulated by this constant balancing act. And there are over 100 different kinds of these messengers. For example, norepinephrine helps control alertness. Serotonin plays a huge role in your mood, and low levels are famously linked to depression. Dopamine is tied to pleasure and emotion, and too much of it is linked to schizophrenia. It's this incredibly complex chemical cocktail that basically defines our mental state at any given moment. So neurotransmitters are the nervous system's messengers,
But believe it or not, they're not the only game in town. The body has a second, much slower communication network. It's called the endocrine system, and it uses its own chemical messengers, hormones.
The best way to think about the difference between these two is with a simple analogy. The nervous system is like sending a text message. It's almost instant, but the feeling passes quickly. The endocrine system, on the other hand, is like sending a letter through the mail. It's slow and steady, but its effects, caused by hormones traveling all through your bloodstream, they stick around for a lot longer. This is exactly why it can take a while to calm down after you got really scared or angry. The endocrine system is basically a team of glands all over your body, and each one has a special job. The adrenal glands, for instance, release adrenaline for those bursts of energy. The pancreas manages your blood sugar. The thyroid regulates your metabolism. You get the picture. They're all squirting out different hormones to control the body's major functions. But there's one gland to rule them all, the pituitary gland. It's this tiny pea-sized thing deep in your brain, but it's known as the master gland. Why? Because it releases hormones that boss around all the other endocrine glands. It's the conductor of your body's entire hormonal orchestra. Okay, we now have all the pieces on the board. Let's go all the way back to that bump in the night and see how these two systems, the fast text and the slow mail, work together in one continuous, fascinating feedback loop. So let's trace the whole thing. It all starts with sensory input. Your ears hear that bang. That signal zips to the brain, which triggers the hypothalamus, the brain's alarm system. The alarm tells the pituitary gland to issue a command right now. The pituitary, our master gland, then orders the adrenal glands to start pumping adrenaline into your bloodstream. Your body responds instantly, heart pounding, senses on high alert, and it's only after all of that happens that your conscious brain finally catches up, figures out it was just the cat, and tells the system to calm down. See? It's a perfect loop from your brain to a gland to a hormone and right back to your brain again. So if that entire heart-pounding, terrifying experience can be broken down into a series of biological and chemical steps, it really leaves you with a pretty profound question, doesn't it? What about love? What about creativity? What about joy? How many of our deepest, most human experiences are also just elegant feedback loops written in the amazing language of the chemical mind?